Chapter 2. The following morning, which happened to be Sunday, the Drake family indulged in a well-deserved lie-in. Jean was the first to stir, and after purchasing the morning papers, he left them at Colonel Drake's doorstep. It was almost 9 o'clock when the family congregated in their private dining room. The previous night's slumber had rejuvenated them all. The mother was in high spirits as she sipped her coffee and enthusiastically planned their day. Of all the American cities, she favored New York the most. The brownstone and marble facades, along with the luxurious carriages and fashionable attire, held a certain allure for her that almost made her forget about her pleasant home and domestic responsibilities in Drakeville. She was fully invested in her husband's latest endeavor to liquidate their business and dedicate the remainder of their lives to politics and high society. Consequently, the conversation at the breakfast table naturally gravitated towards a discussion of the potential reasons for the steamship's tardiness. Kimberly lifted her head and spoke. "Father, the Tribune says, fair weather for New England and the Atlantic coast. Don't worry, the Majestic will bring your Englishman in, I think. It's a beautiful day to be in the city. Come on, Father, let me sweeten your coffee. 1 or 2 lumps?" "2, my dear, please. So what will give you all the most pleasure today?" replied Alfonso. "Why not take a drive and possibly attend some church?" suggested Alfonso. The family agreed, and after breakfast, they got into a carriage driven by Jean and headed through Washington Square, under the American Arch of Triumph, and out Fifth Avenue, the fashionable street of New York. Alfonso acted as their guide. "That white, sepulchral-looking building on the left at the corner of 34th Street is where J.P. Chang, the Irish merchant prince, lived," Alfonso pointed out. Laura remarked, "How true in his case, the proverb, 'Riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away, as an eagle towards heaven.'" "You should quote scripture correctly, my child," said the mother. "Riches take wings." No, Mamma, I am sure that I am right. Riches make themselves wings, and the proverb is as true today as in Solomon's time. Well, Laura, we will look at the hotel Bible on our return. Yes, Mamma, if the hotel has one. Colonel Drake responded, "I think Laura is right. Chang's millions have changed hands. Dead men have no need of dollars. No wonder Chang's bones were restless." Here at West 39th Street is the sumptuous building of the Union League Club. It has over 1,500 members, all pledged to absolute loyalty to the government of the United States, to resist every attempt against the integrity of the nation, and to promote reform in national, state, and municipal affairs. The club equipped and sent 2 full regiments to the front in the Civil War, Alfonso explained. Alfonso also pointed out Jay Gould's old residence, more clubhouses, libraries, the Stimpler Hotel, Dr. Hall's handsome Presbyterian church, and the brownstone and marble palaces of the Vanderbilt family, 2 miles of splendid residences and magnificent churches before you reach Central Park at 59th Street. The walks were thronged with beautiful women and well-dressed men. It was now 10:30 o'clock. The chimes had ceased their hallowed music. People of all nationalities were jostling each other in their haste to enter St. Patrick's Cathedral, a copy of the Gothic masterpiece in Cologne, and the most imposing church building in America. The Drake carriage stopped. Kimberly's heart suddenly began to beat quickly, for she saw Marcellus Parsanian hastening from the cathedral steps towards the carriage. "Good morning, Mrs. Drake. Glad you have come to my church," Marcellus said. Then taking her hand cordially, he added, "And you have brought the family. Well, I am pleased, for you could not have come to a more beautiful church or service." As Marcellus conducted his friends up the granite steps, all were enthusiastic in their praise of the Fifth Avenue facade, white marble from granite base to the topmost stones of the graceful twin spires. All passed under the 12 apostles that decorate the grand portal and entered the cathedral. The interior was as fine as the exterior. The grandeur of the columns and ceiling is imposing, with a decorated or geometric style reminiscent of 13th century Europe. On the right is the Gothic throne of the cardinal. The 4 altars are made of carved French walnut, Tennessee marble, and bronze. Half of the 70 windows are memorials, donated by parishes and individuals from various parts of America. The Vicar General leads the services, his impressive manner and the sweet tones of the singers and organ creating a deep religious feeling in the several thousand present. As they leave the church, Marcellus remarks, In 1786, the kings of France and Spain contributed to the erection of the first cathedral church, St. Peter S., in New York. The Drakes invite Marcellus to dinner and bid him farewell before returning to the Waldorf for lunch. As Colonel Drake waits in the reception room, he glances at the stained-glass window above the entrance to the garden court, depicting the village of Waldorf, the birthplace of John Jacob Astor. This hamlet in the Duchy of Baden, Germany, was fondly remembered in the Astor wills. Astor's father and brother both gained wealth, likely due to the value of money learned in the early Waldorf school of poverty. Young Astor was trapped in the ice of the Chesapeake Bay for weeks, where he learned of the fortunes to be made in furs in the Northwest. He wisely acquired expert knowledge of skins and found employment in a fur store in New York, laying the foundation for the vast Astor fortune. The Waldorf now stands on the site of John Jacob Astor's townhouse, built by his son, William Waldorf, ex-minister to Italy. The Drakes enter the main dining room for lunch, causing a slight diversion among some of the guests who rightly surmise who they are. New York's market rivals few in the world, with the best food from New England and the central states arriving by swift steamers and express. During lunch, the waiter delivers a white card to Colonel Drake, bearing the name of Mr. Christopher Lee, representing Messrs. Gurney and Baring, London. The colour in the Colonel's face deepens as he reads the card. "Oh, nothing," said the Colonel. "Just that our English visitor, Christopher Lee, who was supposed to arrive earlier, has finally sent in his card." "How surprising," said Kimberly. "Father, I mentioned at breakfast that the weather would be fair. Perhaps the Majestic increased its speed and arrived at the docks unnoticed." "I will send him my card," Mr. Drake replied, taking out a pencil and writing, "I will soon join you in the reception room." After finishing their coffee, they all accompanied Colonel Drake to welcome Mr. Lee to America. The English agent was a good sailor and had enjoyed the ocean voyage. Mr. Lee, who had been overworked in England, was forced to rest both his mind and body on the ship. He was a practical man who fully understood the importance of his mission to America and had the tact to succeed. If the proposed deal with Evander Drake was successful, he expected a commission of no less than £5,000. Before the Majestic left the Mersey, Mr. Lee measured the promenade deck of the steamer with a tape line to ensure his mind was alert upon arrival in New York. He resolved to walk enough laps to cover a mile before and after each meal, a total of 6 miles per day, or 48 miles for the entire voyage. His methodical exercise created some comment among the passengers, but it was excused on the grounds that Englishmen believe in much outdoor exercise. Lee came from a good family who lived north of London in Lincolnshire. His father, the Honourable George Lee, had a large investment in lands and 3% consols, with a rule of investment that security must be unquestioned and interest not above 3%. His ancestors were Germans who crossed the German Ocean soon after the Romans withdrew from England. A large area of Lincolnshire lies below the level of the sea, from which it is protected by embankments. This fenny district had gradually been reclaimed, and today the deep loam and peat soils, not unlike the rich farms of Holland, are celebrated for their high condition of agriculture. The Honourable George Lee held mortgages secured upon Lincolnshire estates, some of England's best lands. Christopher Lee, his son, had only known London life since graduating from Cambridge. His office was in Chancery Lane, and his surroundings and teachings had been of the speculative kind, making him a fit agent for his firm. He had already acquired a sunny suburban home in Kent, and was ambitious to hold a seat in Parliament. As he walked the steamer's deck, he looked the typical Englishman, 5 feet 10 inches in height, broad shoulders and full chest, weighing about 200 pounds or 15 stones, as Lee phrased it. His face was round and ruddy, his beard closely cut, and his hair light and fine, indicating quality. His step was firm, and he seemed always in deep study. As he conversed with his fellow passengers, Christopher Lee remained polite and straightforward in his responses. He was eager to learn more about America, or as he referred to it, the Anglo-Saxon Confederation. Lee took pride in his Anglo-Saxon heritage and believed in the eventual dominance of the Anglo-Saxon people over the world. On the ship, there were several young Englishmen returning to their various posts of duty, including 3 buyers for cotton firms and 2 English officers heading to Australia. Like Lee, they were all seeking fame and fortune. As the ship approached Firelight Island, the Englishmen joined the Americans in singing America, and the Americans reciprocated by singing God Save the Queen. Upon arriving at the Waldorf reception room, Lee was surprised when the Drake family approached him. Colonel Drake warmly welcomed him and introduced him to his wife and children. The family was intrigued by Lee's voyage and shared their plans to travel to Europe soon. Lee explained that the delay on the Majestic was due to a broken propeller off the banks of Newfoundland, but he was glad to have finally arrived in New York. Colonel Drake invited Lee to join him and his family on a drive to see the famous Roebling Suspension Bridge. As they drove down Broadway and past the newspaper buildings, Lee expressed a desire to see the bridge up close. When they reached the middle of the bridge, Lee stepped out of the carriage and wrapped his arms around one of the enormous cables. Colonel Drake explained that each cable was made up of over 5,000 steel wires, and a shuttle carried the wire back and forth until the cable was strong enough. The bridge cost $15 million, which was paid for by the two cities. The drive continued up Fifth Avenue, where they saw countless wealthy families in their luxurious carriages entering Central Park. Colonel Drake had explained that Central Park had been transformed from a barren wasteland of rock and swamp into a lush oasis of over 500,000 trees, shrubs, and vines. Thanks to the skill of enthusiastic engineers and landscape gardeners, the park now boasted green lawns, shady groves, vine-covered arbors, miles of roads and walks, and inviting expanses of water. The picturesque architecture and scenery of Central Park rivaled the world's greatest parks. During their ride, the Drake family had the opportunity to observe their guest, Christopher Lee. They were impressed with his abilities and agreed that he was well equipped to protect their English patrons in any business deals that might arise. They planned to dine together at 8, and Marcellus was invited to join the party by Kimberly. The Drakes were pleased with their English visitor, and they were excited about the prospect of securing several £1 million for their manufacturing interests. They hoped that their visit to Europe would be followed by a long-awaited residence in New York, a city that already attracted rich Americans, famous authors, and artists. Like London and Paris, New York had become a natural destination for the world's elite.